Let's start with the sifting work. The sifting work, separating the wheat from the weeds. I often share a story, and sorry if you've already heard it, through the interviews or other things. I do mention it a lot, but it's because it's a simple example of something that's true in my life. Is that in myself, when I was quite young, I sort of grew up a little bit overweight as a kid, and I don't know if it had a huge impact, in a traumatic way, but it did kind of impact the way I saw myself and the way that I saw that others saw me. And so when I hit maybe about, I could say 16 or so, I started to exercise a lot. And that continued for about a good few years, in a sense, at a very sort of intense level, to the point that I was often, fasting or not eating or restricting what I ate and exercising. And it became like a bit of an identity. When we get to talking about self with context, I'll bring that story back in. But the point bringing it up is, if you had met me at that stage and you said, Rick, what do you value? If you were my therapist, I would tell you, well, look, I value, exercise and fitness. I value health and well-being and discipline and perseverance and all these things, right, that are health related. And without kind of sifting that with me a little bit, just kind of sitting with it and sifting it like you would flour, just sifting it to let the purities come down, we would just move forward, and you'd kind of help me move towards those values more. And this is why I think the sifting work is important, because what was underneath those value set was really a way to avoid feeling inadequate. That was for me. That was my personal story, is that these things that I was doing and this value set I was following was really a bunch of rules to protect me from feeling inadequate, and wants to kind of have an image or something that I felt I didn't have. So let's look at the two ways to sift, and we've already talked about one of them, which is looking at roots, right? So when we kind of sifting, just before we talk about roots, when we're sifting values, we're trying to look at the difference between these three, and I've just kind of laid out some slight, definitions, rules, what we should be doing, and wants, what feels good, or avoiding what feels bad. So now when we looking at the root, this is one way to kind of sift a value a little bit, test its purity, in a way, test its quality a little bit. We're kind of looking at what's underneath the value. And as you keep asking me, if I was your client at that stage, why are these things important to you? What would life look like if you didn't have those things? What would be the reason for pursuing them the way that you do? At the core of it, you'd probably get to the root of a fear of inadequacy, fear of not fitting in, fear of not being good enough. This is often the value. Whereas if you take another value that you might hold, let's say a value of, let's say a value of being honest with people. What's underneath that value? Why do you want to be honest? If it is truly a value, then most of the time you come to some sort of sense of just because it's important, or just because it is good, just because it is my best concept of how I would like my life to be. It is a chosen direction, not an obligated direction. Or I should say the root is because it's good, because you see it as good, rather than because it's solving something for you. Another way that we kind of sift values is talking about the fruit. In other words, what does it taste like when you actually pursue it? So just like with wheat and weeds, if you kind of pull up any different tree, you'll see that their root structure is often different. And even if it doesn't look different, it's obviously absorbing things differently from the soil to create different plants, different fruit. And so in other words, with wheat, with the concept of fruit, obviously wheat is not fruit, but just I hope it makes sense. The concept is we're looking not at its root, but at its product, what it produces, in the sense of saying, when you pursue this thing in your life, what is the outcome? So for example, for people who've got a rule of achieving highly, in a sense, I need to achieve highly in order to be good enough. If you can relate to that, just think, when you achieve highly, notice what it's like. Notice if it actually leads to this sense of a settled experience like peace or something, or whether it triggers either the need to do it again and keep doing it, kind of like if you're eating something that doesn't fill you up, it's not actually food, it's just kind of going in, but it's not filling you up. Or is it, or do you find yourself even just noticing what you haven't done well still, you know, in a sense, like kind of, you know, what's it like when you pursue it? What does it taste like? And so for me, like with exercise, that example, the more I would exercise, it wouldn't lead to this sense of peace or anything, any settled experience. There was not a sense of vitality. There was a sense of a need to keep doing more, an insatiable need to keep doing more. Now, this isn't the case for all things, and I'm not saying things are either values, rules, or wants. I mean, that's probably what you're hearing, and it's probably the way I phrased it. I guess what I'm saying more so is things may not be values, rules, or wants. Many values, let me say that again. Many rules may be value-based. Many wants may have values hidden within them. The question is, when you look at it yourself, when you look at this thing yourself that you're saying you value, how are you holding it? Are you holding it so tightly that it is a rule, you know, in a sense for you? Or are you pursuing it so compulsively that you almost feel inadequate without it? Or are you pursuing it freely? Whatever you're pursuing it, how's that working for you? So it's not to say, I'm not kind of coming up with an objective kind of ruler to say we need to help clients identify this and not this, but it's just to kind of help clients by bringing up something that you're noticing about something that they say that they value, and actually kind of just looking at what that's like to pursue in their life. How's it actually working for them? That's kind of this work of sifting values.